No, people like you don't walk into a bank like this and ask for $100,000. Try the check cashing place down the block. Sir, please, I only want to make a withdrawal. Let me guess, you found that slip somewhere and thought you could use it. People like you always have some kind of scheme. Sir, that's inappropriate. I am a customer. A customer. You don't look like the kind of person who banks here. The teller's voice carried across the polished marble lobby. Customers turned their heads. An elderly white woman lifted one hand to her mouth. A young security guard near the entrance shifted uneasily, as if his body knew something was wrong before he decided what to do about it. The black woman standing at the counter did not move. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply lifted her eyes and looked directly at the man behind the counter. Calm, steady, patient, almost as if something had already been set in motion. Not long afterward, that same teller would be on his knees asking her to forgive him. The woman standing at the marble counter was Celeste Monroe. She was 42 years old, the mother of one daughter, and on that ordinary morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, she was wearing the plainest clothes she owned. A charcoal coat over a simple white button-down shirt, dark jeans and leather flats softened at the heels from years of wear. Her tote bag was cracked around the handles. On her wrist was a plain steel watch her father had given her when she was 16. No diamonds, no designer handbag, no expensive necklace, no makeup beyond a little lip balm. That was intentional. Celeste had left home early and driven herself in a 6-year-old sport utility vehicle with a small dent in the rear bumper. On the way, she stopped at a black-owned coffee shop on Beatty's Ford Road, where the barista greeted her by name and slid a hot cinnamon latte across the counter before she even ordered. "Morning, Miss Celeste." "The usual." Celeste smiled, thanked her, and left a $20 tip on a $4 drink, the way she often did. Later, sitting alone inside a parking garage, a short walk from the bank, Celeste closed her eyes for a moment and took a slow breath. She quietly rehearsed the plan in her head. She had done this many times. Every so often, without warning anyone, she chose one of her branches, dressed simply, walked in as an ordinary customer, and watched. She watched how employees greeted people, how they spoke to elderly customers, how they treated someone who seemed wealthy, how they treated someone who did not. Most of all, she watched how they treated the person they believed had the least power in the room. Because Celeste Monroe was not just another customer. She was the sole owner of Monroe Heritage Bank Group, 143 branches across the American Southeast, more than $1.2 billion in assets, and a reputation built around serving communities that larger financial institutions had ignored for generations. The building she was about to enter belonged to her company. Every teller window, every desk, every lamp, every chair, every marble tile in the lobby, all of it was part of the institution she owned. But almost nobody in the branches knew her face. She had kept it that way deliberately. Her photograph was not displayed on branch walls. Her portrait was not hanging behind the manager's desk. Her name did not appear on the brass plaque by the entrance. Years earlier, after her father's funeral, Celeste had taken control of the family holding company and made herself one private promise. She would build the kind of bank her father had dreamed about, and she would make sure that inside those buildings, the janitor and the chief executive officer were treated with the same basic human dignity. Her father, Samuel Monroe, had been born into deep poverty in rural Alabama. He began with one used truck and slowly built a freight company through long days, hard decisions, and a telephone that never seemed to stop ringing. By the time he died, he had created a transportation business, a portfolio of warehouses, and enough wealth to leave his daughter options he had never had. But the most important thing he left her was not money. It was a handwritten letter folded inside the family Bible. The message was simple. "Baby girl, build something that looks out for our people. The world won't always do it for them." Celeste never forgot those words. She built carefully, quietly, one struggling community bank at a time. Acquisition after acquisition. She merged them into Monroe Heritage. She hired locally. She trained people seriously. She paid employees well. And on a regular basis, she put on ordinary clothes and walked into one of her own branches to find out whether the mission still lived beyond the corporate brochures and polished marble. The Charlotte Midtown branch was one of those visits. When Celeste entered, cool air met her immediately. The lobby smelled faintly of industrial lemon cleaner. Several teller windows lined one side of the room, though only a couple were open. A check scanning machine clicked in a steady rhythm somewhere behind the counter. A desk phone rang briefly in the back, then went silent. At the branch manager's desk in the corner, a heavy-set white man in a navy blazer leaned back in his chair with his feet slightly forward, laughing into his phone about a golf score. His nameplate read Martin Keene, branch manager. He did not look up when Celeste walked in. At one of the open teller windows, a young man with carefully styled hair finished counting bills for a customer in a tailored suit. The teller called him sir several times in the same conversation. His nameplate read Trevor Langley. Celeste approached the counter. She placed her withdrawal slip on the marble. She smiled. Her voice was warm and low, and that was when Trevor Langley opened his mouth. The moment his words crossed the counter, the atmosphere in the lobby changed. A businessman at the next station stopped halfway through signing a document. An elderly woman standing farther back in line slowly lowered her reading glasses. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore. She was in her late 70s and had banked at that branch for many years. A young black man near the entrance, wearing a Duke University sweatshirt, stopped looking at his phone and raised his head. The young security guard by the doors shifted forward slightly, then stopped himself. Celeste did not react the way many people expected her to. She did not shout. She did not slam the counter. She did not lose the patient expression she had entered with. She simply placed her fingertips lightly against the marble and waited until Trevor finished speaking. Then she said, "My name is on the withdrawal slip. My account number is on the withdrawal slip. My driver's license is right here. I would like to complete my withdrawal, please." Trevor made a small sound in his throat that was halfway between a laugh and a scoff. He picked up Celeste's driver's license with 2 fingers, holding it as though he disliked touching it. He raised it towards the overhead lights, turned it sideways, tilted it, looked at the card, then at Celeste, then back at the card. He sighed dramatically. "Celeste Monroe," he said slowly. "That's really your name." "It has been my name my whole life." Trevor gave a doubtful little sound. Then he slid the license toward his coworker, a younger teller named Paige. "Paige, come look at this. Does this look real to you?" Paige glanced over. Her eyes moved across Celeste's clothes, her tote bag, and her face. Then she gave a small giggle. "Looks fine to me, Trevor. I'm busy." Trevor shrugged as if Paige's response somehow supported him. Then he dropped Celeste's license onto the counter from a few inches above the marble. It landed face down. Celeste calmly turned it right side up and ran her thumb once across the surface. Next, Trevor took her debit card. He swiped it. The system approved it. He swiped it again. Approved. Again. Approved. He tried once more. Approved. Trevor stared at the screen as though the computer had betrayed him. His coworkers were now glancing sideways, uncertain whether they should intervene or pretend they had not noticed. "Your account is showing some unusual activity," Trevor announced loudly. "A lot of it. I'm not comfortable with this." There were no alerts. Celeste could see enough of the screen reflected in a polished pillar behind him to know exactly what he was seeing. Her account was in excellent standing. Every indicator on the screen confirmed that. She tried again. "If there is a specific concern, I am happy to speak with your supervisor." "Oh, we'll get there," Trevor said. "First, I'm going to need documentation. A lot of documentation." He pulled a yellow legal pad from beneath the counter and began writing with exaggerated seriousness. Celeste watched him invent requirements as he went. "I need 2 forms of government identification. You have 1. I'll also need your original Social Security card, not a photocopy. Utility bills showing your current address, federal tax returns, a notarized statement explaining the source of the money, and a letter of reference from another account holder in good standing, preferably a longtime customer who can personally vouch for you." Celeste kept her expression composed. None of those items are required for a routine withdrawal from a verified account under federal funds, availability rules, or this bank's own customer service policy. Trevor lifted his eyebrows. "Oh, you read the bank policy now." "I have," Celeste said quietly, "more than once." Trevor burst out laughing. It was the laugh of a man who believed he had just heard something absurd. He slapped one palm against the counter. Behind Celeste, the businessman at the next teller window completed a large cash withdrawal. He showed 1 form of identification. The teller addressed him politely. His money was counted into neat banded stacks and placed carefully into a leather bag. He was thanked for his business and wished a pleasant day. Celeste watched the entire transaction. When the man left, she turned back to Trevor. Her voice remained calm, but something in it had cooled. That customer just withdrew $80,000 in cash. He presented one form of identification. I have presented everything required to verify my account. Tell me exactly what is different about his transaction and mine. Trevor leaned forward on his elbows. His smile widened. I'll be honest with you, that man is a longtime client. I know his face. I know his name. I know where his money comes from. Then he gestured vaguely at Celeste. I don't know. And looking at you, I find it hard to believe this money is really yours. Something cold moved through Celeste's chest. She did not let it show. The money in that account is mine, she said. Every cent. Earned legally, reported properly, and mine. Trevor reached for a printed suspicious activity form and slapped it onto the counter. Then maybe you can explain where it came from. Dates, employers, transfers, names. Because I think this could become a federal reporting issue. Celeste looked directly at him, questioning a customer's lawful funds during a routine verified withdrawal because you have decided she looks suspicious is not an acceptable banking practice. It also raises serious concerns under federal civil rights and fair lending laws. Trevor rolled his eyes. Here we go. The lawyer speech. People like you always go straight to the lawyer speech. The words people like you landed heavily across the lobby. Eleanor Whitmore tightened her grip on her purse. The young man in the Duke sweatshirt quietly began recording on his phone. His name was Andre Lawson. He was a law student. Trevor did not notice. He kept going. I've worked behind this counter for years. I've seen every scam there is. Fake checks, stolen identities, pension cards taken from elderly people. You think I got this job by trusting everybody who walks in here. I notice things. Celeste asked, what exactly are you noticing? Trevor looked at her and said, you don't belong here. The lobby went still. Somewhere behind Celeste, a pen fell to the floor. No one picked it up. Celeste breathed in slowly. Her fingers remained on the marble. I would like to speak with your branch manager, she said. Please. You'll get him, Trevor replied, suddenly cheerful. Then he turned and called across the lobby. Martin, I need you over here. We've got a problem. At the manager's desk, Martin Keene finally looked up. He took in Celeste with one practiced glance. His facial expression barely changed, but his shoulders settled in a way that suggested he had seen situations like this before and already believed he knew how they should end. He set his phone face down, stood, buttoned his navy blazer, then walked toward the teller counter with the slow confidence of someone accustomed to making other people wait. Celeste watched him approach. She also glanced at her watch. Her daughter was waiting for her later that morning at a scholarship ceremony. Talia Monroe was 15 years old. She lived with an anxiety disorder. For 2 years, she had helped design a scholarship program for students from families who had been overlooked, underfunded, or told that college was beyond their reach. Talia was the reason Celeste wanted $100,000 that day. Celeste tightened her grip around the handle of her tote. Her knuckles went pale. But when Martin reached the counter, her face was a mask of professional calm. Ma'am, Martin said smoothly, I'm Martin, the branch manager. I understand we have a situation. Why don't you explain what happened? Your teller has refused to process a withdrawal from my verified account. He has demanded documentation that is not required. He has accused me of theft. And he has said in front of multiple witnesses that I do not belong in this building. Martin nodded as though he were listening carefully. He did not write anything down. He did not look at Trevor. Instead, he studied Celeste from head to toe. Then he leaned slightly closer. I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Is someone making you do this? Is somebody telling you to withdraw this money for them? Because if that is happening, you can tell me. You're safe here. We can help you. The implication hit differently from Trevor's accusation. Now she was not being treated like a thief. She was being treated as though she could not possibly understand her own finances, as though some invisible person must be controlling her, as though a woman who looked like her could not possibly walk into a bank and knowingly request her own money. Mr. Keene, Celeste said, nobody is forcing me to do anything. This is my money. I need to withdraw it today. Martin straightened. His face hardened. All right, we tried to handle this calmly. He reached for the branch phone. Then he called emergency services. Yes, this is Martin Keene, branch manager at Monroe Heritage Bank, Midtown Charlotte. I have a situation involving a black female customer who is attempting to withdraw $100,000 from an account we believe may be fraudulent. She is becoming confrontational and refusing to cooperate. Please send officers. He hung up. Then he gave Celeste a thin smile. They're on the way. Why don't you sit on that bench until this is sorted out? Celeste did not move. Her phone began vibrating inside her coat. She pulled it out. Talia's name appeared on the screen. Celeste turned slightly away from the counter and answered softly. Hi, baby. I'm here. Mom. Talia's voice sounded thin and unsteady. Mom, I can't breathe right. There are so many people here. Miss Delgado said you'd be here already. Where are you? Are you coming? Celeste closed her eyes. Talia, listen to me. Breathe in slowly. Hold it. Now breathe out, just like we practiced. I'm coming, baby. You built this program. You did the work. You are stronger than this moment feels. I am so proud of you, and I am coming. Okay, Talia whispered. Please hurry. Celeste lowered the phone. Before she could put it away, Martin reached across and took it from her hand. Celeste stared at him. That is my phone. I cannot allow you to coordinate with anyone while police are on the way. This could be evidence. That was my daughter. Martin gave a doubtful look. I'm sure it was. He placed the phone inside a desk drawer and locked it with a small brass key. We'll sort everything out when the officers arrive. Something changed in the lobby. Eleanor Whitmore slowly stood from her chair. She walked across the marble using her cane. Then she placed one fragile hand on Celeste's forearm. Dear, she said quietly, my granddaughter has panic attacks too. I know what that sounds like. I am so sorry. Celeste looked down at Eleanor's hand. For the first time, something in her expression shifted. Not into tears, into resolve. She covered Eleanor's hand with her own and squeezed gently. Thank you. Then Celeste turned back toward Martin. You have detained me without lawful reason. You have interfered with my personal property. You have made a false emergency report based on information you could have verified in seconds. Every part of this has been witnessed and recorded. I want you to understand clearly that there will be consequences. Martin laughed. Big words for someone who still cannot prove the account is hers. Sit down. The police will be here soon. Trevor stood behind him, smiling now that he felt protected by his manager. Then he leaned toward Celeste and lowered his voice just enough to sound almost conversational. Just so you know, the police around here don't have much patience for people who get difficult. You might want to calm yourself before they arrive. Wouldn't want there to be a misunderstanding. The threat was rapid in polite language, but everyone nearby understood it. Andre Lawson no longer tried to hide his phone. He held it openly, recording. A Latino delivery driver pulled out his phone as well. An older white veteran with a cane stood up near the window. His name was Harold Mercer. He spoke loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. I did not serve this country to stand by and watch this happen in my own neighborhood bank. Martin barely reacted. He kept looking toward the front doors, waiting for the police. Trevor reached across the counter toward Celeste's tote bag. Let's take a look inside before the officers arrive. Standard precaution. Do not touch my bag. I'm doing my job. His hand closed around one strap. Celeste's hand closed around his wrist. For one brief second, the entire lobby held its breath. Trevor tightened his grip on the bag. Celeste did not squeeze harder. She simply held his wrist firmly and said, "Let go of my bag." Or what? Trevor pulled. The tote slipped from Celeste's shoulder. Its side struck the counter. The contents spilled across the marble. A leather wallet, car keys, an electronic reader, a small silver pen, and a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. The envelope slid across the floor and stopped near Martin's shoes. Martin picked it up. Without asking, he turned it over. The wax seal carried an embossed tree with deep roots and the words Monroe Heritage Foundation. Martin glanced at it, then tore it open. Inside was a printed list of 50 names. Each name was paired with a photograph. 50 young faces. Black, Latino, biracial, all under 19. Each profile included a short paragraph about grades, community service, intended majors, and dream schools. Martin read from the top page in a mocking tone. Westside Community College Scholarship Program. First-year recipients. 50 students. He flicked the page with the back of one hand. So you're telling me you plan to take $100,000 in cash from this branch and hand it out to a group of inner-city kids? He did not say the harsher word his expression seemed to suggest. He did not need to. Trevor laughed. This is unbelievable. It's not even just a scam. It's a scam dressed up like charity. Celeste did not move. She did not reach for the papers. She simply looked at Martin, really looked at him. And in that moment, the decision-making part of her face became completely still. Outside the glass doors, police lights appeared. 2 cruisers stopped near the curb. Red and blue reflections moved across the marble. 4 officers stepped out. The lead officer was a tall black man in his early 50s with graying temples and the careful posture of someone who had spent decades learning not to rush to conclusions. He paused outside, looked up at the brass plaque, Monroe Heritage Bank. Then he walked inside. His name tag read Detective Malcolm Reed. Martin moved toward him almost immediately. Detective, thank goodness. She's right over there. The black woman by the counter, she refused to cooperate. She became aggressive with my teller. She tried to justify the transaction with some suspicious charity story. Trevor added from behind the counter, she grabbed me. You should arrest her for assault. Detective Reed raised one hand. Only one. But both men stopped talking. He walked past Martin, past Trevor, past the belongings scattered on the floor. Then he stopped a few feet in front of Celeste. And in front of everyone in the lobby, Detective Malcolm Reed removed his department-issued cap and held it against his chest. Miss Monroe, his voice was respectful. I did not expect to meet you under circumstances like this. Are you all right? Behind him, Martin's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His eyes moved from Detective Reed to Celeste, then to the brass bank plaque visible through the front windows, and back again. You know her? Detective Reed turned slowly. Mr. Keene, are you telling me you genuinely do not know who this woman is? She's a customer who... Detective Reed lifted one open hand toward Celeste. This is Celeste Monroe, founder, principal owner, and chairwoman of the board of Monroe Heritage Bank Group. This is the bank you work for. This building belongs to the institution she owns. The desk you sit behind, the branch budget, the company that signs your paycheck, all of it falls under her ownership. The color left Trevor Langley's face instantly. His lips turned pale. His hands gripped the counter. His knees softened enough that he had to brace himself against the register. Martin did not turn pale. He simply became still. The kind of stillness that comes when a person suddenly understands that every decision made during the last hour has been witnessed, recorded, and attached forever to his name. For a few seconds, the only sound in the lobby was the wall clock. Celeste slowly turned toward the torn scholarship envelope. She gathered the papers, folded them carefully, placed them back inside her tote. Then she looked at Detective Reed. I would like to file a formal report. Detective Reed took out a notebook. Of course. Tell me what happened. Celeste's voice carried through the lobby. Unlawful detention. Mr. Keene ordered security to prevent me from leaving and instructed me to sit down while I was not free to leave. She continued. Physical interference with my person and property. Mr. Langley grabbed my wrist and forcibly pulled my bag away from me. Multiple witnesses recorded it. She continued. Unauthorized search and interference with personal property. Mr. Keene opened a sealed private envelope without permission and read its contents aloud in a public lobby. She continued. Discrimination in the provision of banking services based on race, including conduct that raises serious issues under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Section 1981, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Then she added the final point, and a false report to emergency services. The recording will show exactly what was said. Detective Reed wrote each item carefully. When he finished, he closed the notebook. Then he looked toward one of the officers behind him. Officer Blake, please ask Mr. Keene to place his hands behind his back. Martin's face collapsed. He stumbled backward until his hands hit the edge of the counter. Wait, no, please. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who she was. If I had known who she was, I would never have done any of this. Detective Reed turned toward him. His voice remained calm. That is exactly the problem. Martin stared. Detective Reed continued. You are telling me that you would have treated her differently if you had known she was wealthy and powerful. That means you understand the treatment itself was wrong. You simply believed it was acceptable when you thought she had no power to challenge you. Martin said nothing. The handcuffs closed around his wrists. Eleanor Whitmore whispered from behind Celeste. Good. Then Officer Blake turned toward Trevor. Mr. Langley, please step out from behind the counter. Trevor did not step out. His knees gave way. He came around the counter and lowered himself onto the marble. Then he moved toward Celeste on his knees. Tears ran down his face. "Miss Monroe, please, please, I'm begging you. I have 2 little kids. My wife is in treatment for cancer. I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought." Celeste did not step away. She did not humiliate him. She slowly lowered herself until she was closer to eye level. "Mr. Langley." Her voice was gentle. That gentleness made the room even quieter. "I am truly sorry about your wife. I'm sorry your children are going through something painful, and I need you to hear what I am about to say." Trevor nodded, crying. "You were not simply following orders. You were not having one bad moment. You had chances to stop." Celeste looked toward Eleanor. "That woman told you what you were doing was wrong." Trevor followed her gaze. "You had a choice then. You could have stopped. You could have apologized. You could have looked at the account. You could have processed the transaction. You could have gone home to your family with your job intact." Trevor's face twisted. Celeste continued softly. "You chose to keep going. That choice matters. What people do when they believe nobody important is watching tells us something about who they are becoming." She stood. "I hope your children grow up seeing you take responsibility for what happened here. I hope they learn from the choices you made, and I hope you become someone they can respect for what you do next." Officer Blake stepped forward. The handcuffs closed around Trevor's wrists. As the officers guided Martin and Trevor toward the entrance, Martin turned his head one last time. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry." Celeste watched him. Her voice was not angry. "Mr. Keene, being sorry that there are consequences is not the same as being sorry for the harm you caused. I hope you learn the difference." The glass doors closed behind them. Applause broke out in the lobby. Celeste did not stay to watch the police cars leave. She looked at her watch. Talia was waiting. Celeste picked up her tote. She placed the scholarship envelope inside. Then she turned toward Detective Reed. "Detective, my daughter is waiting for me at the Westside Community College auditorium. I am already late. I would be grateful for help getting there." Detective Reed did not hesitate. "It would be my honor." Soon afterward, a Charlotte police cruiser stopped outside a crowded auditorium on the west side of the city. Celeste stepped out with her tote over one shoulder and the envelope containing 50 student names held against her chest. A teenage girl in a navy dress came running down the front steps. Talia Monroe crashed into her mother's arms with the full force of a 15-year-old who had spent too long trying not to cry in front of strangers. "Mom, I'm here, baby. I told you I would come. I'm sorry I'm late." Talia held on tightly. Celeste held her back. Then mother and daughter walked inside together. They stepped onto the stage hand in hand. Celeste spoke only briefly. She did not mention the bank. She did not mention the police. She did not mention Martin or Trevor. She handed her daughter a certified check for $100,000. Then she stepped aside. Talia took the microphone. Her hands shook. But she began calling the 50 scholarship recipients forward by name. One by one, young people walked onto the stage. Some cried. Some laughed. Some looked stunned. Families stood. Teachers applauded. The audience rose to its feet. For a few minutes, the world was exactly what Samuel Monroe had once hoped it might become. A place where someone's hard work could open a door for the next person. That could have been the end of the story. A mother reaches her daughter's event. A bank fires 2 employees. Scholarships are awarded. Everyone goes home. But Andre Lawson, the law student in the Duke sweatshirt, had recorded much of what happened inside the lobby. Later, he uploaded the footage to the internet. His caption was simple. "This is what happened inside Monroe Heritage Bank in Charlotte. The black woman they treated like she did not belong owns the bank." The video spread with astonishing speed. Millions watched it. Then millions more. The story moved across social media and into national news. Soon, Celeste Monroe, a private billionaire who had spent years avoiding publicity, became one of the most recognizable faces in the country. But the hardest part of the story came after the cameras turned away from the lobby. Monroe Heritage Bank's Internal Compliance Division opened a full investigation into Martin Keene's years as branch manager. Chief Compliance Officer Victor Sloan ordered investigators to pull everything: customer complaints, loan records, internal notes, withdrawal disputes, manager overrides, personnel files. The findings broke Celeste's heart. Trevor Langley had been named in 9 formal customer complaints during the previous several years. Every complaint came from a Black or Latino customer. Everyone had been closed without a meaningful investigation. Martin had personally overseen loan decisions that showed a disturbing pattern. When analysts compared applicants with similar credit profiles, minority applicants at his branch had been denied at roughly 3 times the rate of white applicants. Investigators also found more than 30 similar incidents involving delayed or refused withdrawals at that branch. Celeste authorized an outside audit firm to contact every affected customer. She hired the civil rights firm of Hall, Bennett and Associates, led by longtime general counsel Cedric Hall, to provide legal representation at the bank's expense. She did not resist the investigation. She funded it. When the class action case was resolved, the bank agreed to pay $15 million. Celeste personally added another $5 million of her own money to the compensation pool. When reporters asked why, she gave one answer: "It happened in my building. The number on the check should reflect that." Trevor later faced criminal proceedings in Mecklenburg County Superior Court. The courtroom was crowded. Celeste sat in the second row wearing a plain charcoal suit. Beside her sat Andre Lawson, who had since begun working at a civil rights firm. Eleanor Whitmore sat nearby. To her own surprise, Eleanor had become a familiar public figure after speaking openly about what she witnessed. She had also been invited to join the newly created Monroe Heritage Customer Dignity Advisory Board. During the trial, prosecutors played uninterrupted lobby footage. The jury watched Trevor question Celeste's identity. They watched him treat another customer differently. They watched him invent requirements. They watched him grab her bag. They watched him mock the scholarship papers. They watched the arrival of the police. The jury convicted Trevor on all counts brought against him. He received 18 months of probation, 300 hours of community service at a minority-owned small business development center, a civil judgment of $45,000, and a permanent ban from working at financial institutions regulated by the Federal Reserve System. Martin accepted reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. He received an $85,000 personal fine, a 10-year ban from supervisory banking positions, and 200 hours of mandatory civil rights education. The case triggered changes far beyond one branch. The American Bankers Association adopted a voluntary industry standard calling for regular bias audits of customer-facing employees at member institutions. The press gave the policy a nickname: the Monroe Protocol. Several of the country's largest banks announced similar internal programs soon afterward. Celeste gave only one major interview. She chose the Charlotte Post, a black-owned newspaper that had covered her father's work for decades. She sat at a kitchen table with a veteran reporter and a cup of tea. The reporter asked whether Celeste considered herself heroic. Celeste shook her head. "I didn't do anything heroic. I walked into my own building." She paused. "The real story is the thousands of women who walk into buildings they do not own and get treated exactly the way I was treated. Those are the stories that matter. I happen to have the deed." That sentence traveled farther than anything else she said. Outside the courthouse after the verdict, a reporter caught Trevor walking toward a waiting car. He did not speak directly into the microphone. He barely seemed to notice it. He simply said quietly, almost to himself, "I thought I was doing my job. I never really saw her. I only saw what I had been taught to see." The reporter wrote the sentence down. She did not publish it at the time, but she kept it. Later, the Charlotte Midtown branch reopened under new leadership. The new branch manager was a 31-year-old woman named Renee Parker. She had been promoted from within the company. She was the first black woman to lead that branch in its history. On one of Renee's first days, a quiet woman wearing jeans and a charcoal coat walked through the front doors. She waited in line. She carried a small withdrawal slip. Everyone recognized her now. Celeste Monroe was no longer anonymous inside her own company. Renee greeted her normally, checked the account, processed the transaction efficiently, used the same respectful tone she would have used with any customer. As Celeste reached the door, she turned around. "Thank you, Renee. You're doing beautiful work." Renee smiled. After Celeste left, Renee went into the back office and sat quietly for a few minutes, trying to steady her hands. The 50 scholarship recipients from Talia's ceremony continued their education. One of them, a young woman named Kiara Bennett, chose to major in finance. During a local interview, Kiara explained why. "I want to be the person behind the counter who actually sees people. I want to be like Miss Renee. And maybe someday I want to build something like Miss Celeste did." Eleanor Whitmore attended her first meeting of the Customer Dignity Advisory Board wearing pearls and carrying homemade cookies. She took extensive notes. She asked difficult questions. She refused to let anyone turn the board into a public relations decoration. She wanted it to matter. Trevor completed his community service at a small business development center on the west side of Charlotte. He helped minority-owned businesses organize quarterly filings and prepare paperwork. On his final day, a 60-year-old black woman who owned a small catering company hugged him goodbye. Trevor sat in his car afterward and cried. He did not tell his family exactly why. Talia continued speaking at public events. Her hand still shook before every speech. Her breathing still became difficult sometimes. She still felt the urge to run, but she kept walking onto the stage. And inside Celeste's corporate office, on a wall visible from her desk, hangs one framed document behind museum glass. A withdrawal slip. $100,000 written in Celeste's own handwriting. A faint crease still runs across the middle from the moment Trevor once pushed it back toward her as though she did not belong. Beneath the frame is a small brass plaque. It reads, "Never forget who gets told no." Because dignity is not a dress code. Wealth does not belong to one race, one neighborhood, one accent, or one kind of clothing. But even that is not the deepest lesson. The deepest lesson is not that the person you dismiss might secretly be wealthy. It is not that the customer you insult might secretly own the building. It is not that the stranger you judge might be powerful enough to cost you your job. Those ideas are dramatic, but they miss the point. A person should not need to be rich before we treat them with respect. They should not need to be famous. They should not need to own the company. They should not need a detective to recognize their name. They should not need lawyers, cameras, witnesses, or power. They should only need to be human. Celeste's real strength in that lobby was not the money in her account. It was not the ownership documents. It was not the fact that one phone call could change Martin's career. Her strength was the way she held on to herself when people around her tried to define her by an assumption. She stayed calm when anger would have been understandable. She protected her dignity without surrendering her voice. She did not become cruel when the balance of power shifted. That does not mean she avoided consequences. Consequences mattered. The employees who caused harm had to answer for their choices. The bank had to compensate people who had been treated unfairly. Policies had to change. Leadership had to change. The institution had to examine what it had allowed to happen inside its own walls. Forgiveness does not mean pretending harm never happened. Compassion does not mean ignoring responsibility. Real accountability is not revenge. It is the honest recognition that our choices affect other people, and when those choices cause harm, we have a duty to repair what we can. Martin and Trevor were given many chances to stop. They could have checked the account. They could have read the system correctly. They could have listened to Celeste. They could have listened to Eleanor. They could have noticed that other customers were being treated differently. They could have slowed down. They could have asked one more question before making one more assumption. They did not. That is one of the quiet truths in this story. Many life-changing moments do not begin with huge decisions. They begin with small ones. A tone of voice, a joke, a look, a decision to ignore someone's explanation, a decision to believe a stereotype because checking the facts feels inconvenient, a decision to stay silent because speaking up might feel uncomfortable. And, sometimes just as quietly, a better future begins with small choices too. Eleanor walking across the lobby and placing a hand on Celeste's arm. Andre lifting his phone and deciding to document what he saw. Harold standing up and saying that what was happening was not acceptable. Detective Reed listening before assuming. Renee later deciding that every person who approached her counter would be treated as someone worthy of being seen. Those actions matter. Kindness does not always arrive as a grand gesture. Sometimes kindness is simply taking someone seriously. Sometimes courage is saying, "This is not right." Sometimes integrity is checking the facts when everyone around you seems comfortable with an assumption. Sometimes growth begins with admitting, "I was wrong." And sometimes healing begins when a person who has been hurt decides not to pass that hurt on to someone else. Celeste could have used the moment only to destroy people. Instead, she also used it to rebuild systems. She funded an investigation. She compensated customers. She changed leadership. She supported scholarships. She created a customer dignity board. She forced the bank to confront something that could no longer be hidden behind polished marble and good marketing. That is a kind of leadership that does not simply ask, "Who should be punished?" It also asks, "What must change so this does not happen again?" That question is harder and more useful. Samuel Monroe once asked his daughter to build something that looked out for people. Celeste spent years believing she had done exactly that. Then one ordinary morning, she walked into one of her own branches and learned that a mission written in a founder's letter is not enough. Values do not survive because they are printed on a wall. They survive only when people practice them. At the counter, in the manager's office, during a loan decision, during a withdrawal, when no cameras are present, when no powerful person is watching, when the customer seems ordinary, especially then. That may be the most important lesson in the entire story. Character is not what we do after we discover someone is important. Character is what we do before we know, before the title, before the bank balance, before the last name, before the connections, before the consequences. Every person who walks toward us is carrying a life we cannot see. Someone may be a mother trying not to disappoint her daughter. Someone may be a father working 2 jobs. Someone may be carrying grief. Someone may be carrying a dream. Someone may be holding a scholarship list in an envelope. Someone may simply be trying to finish an ordinary errand and go home. We do not know, and because we do not know, kindness is not naive. It is wise. Respect is not something another person has to earn before we give it. Basic dignity should be where we begin. There is also something worth remembering about Trevor. His later words mattered. I never really saw her. I only saw what I had been taught to see. That does not erase what he did. It does not remove the consequences. But it points toward a difficult truth. People can inherit harmful ideas. They can absorb habits from workplaces, families, communities, and cultures without examining them. But learning something harmful does not remove responsibility. At some point, each of us has to decide what we will keep, what we will question, what we will unlearn, what kind of person we want to become. That is where responsibility begins. Not with pretending we have never judged unfairly, not with insisting we have always been perfect, but with the courage to notice when our assumptions are controlling our behavior, then choosing differently. Talia's story matters too. She did not become fearless. She still felt anxiety. Her hands still shook. Her breathing still became difficult. But courage is not the absence of fear. Sometimes courage is walking onto the stage while your hands shake. Sometimes strength is doing the thing while part of you wants to run. Talia kept speaking. She kept showing up. And somewhere among those 50 scholarship recipients, another young person watched her and learned that being afraid does not mean being incapable. The same is true for all of us. We will not always know what to say. We will not always react perfectly. Sometimes we will realize too late that we should have spoken. Sometimes we will be Eleanor and step forward. Sometimes we will be Officer Cole, the young security guard who hesitated and later had to think about why. Sometimes we may discover something uncomfortable about ourselves. That can be painful, but discomfort is not the enemy. What matters is what we do with it. We can defend ourselves. We can make excuses. We can blame pressure, or we can listen, learn, apologize, accept consequences, and become more careful with the dignity of the next person we meet. That is what living decently often looks like. Not perfection, attention, humility, responsibility, and the willingness to choose kindness before we know whether kindness will benefit us. So think about the counters you stand behind, literal or otherwise, the places where you hold a little more power than someone else. A workplace, a classroom, a store, a family, an office, a hospital, a bank, a conversation. How do you treat the person who cannot help your career? How do you speak to someone who looks nervous? How quickly do you assume? How willing are you to check? How do you behave when you believe nobody important is watching? Those questions reveal more about us than titles ever will. And when you are the person standing on the other side of that counter, when someone decides who you are before you have even spoken, remember Celeste. Not because she was rich, not because she owned the building. Remember the steadiness, the refusal to let another person's prejudice decide her worth, the quiet certainty that dignity does not disappear just because someone refuses to recognize it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remain rooted in who we are while still insisting that what is wrong must change. Share this story with someone who may need that reminder. And if stories about courage, dignity, responsibility, second chances, and justice matter to you, stay with us for more. Because every person who walks up to a counter carries the same basic human worth. Different clothes, different skin, different jobs, Different names, different stories, but the same need to be treated as a person. So slow down before you judge. Check the facts before you assume. Listen when someone speaks. Speak when you see harm. Own your mistakes when you make them. Repair what you can, and choose decency before you know who someone is, what they own, or what they can do for you. Maybe the person in front of you is powerful. Maybe they are not. Maybe they are wealthy. Maybe they are struggling. Maybe they are somebody's mother, somebody's daughter, somebody's whole world. Or maybe they are simply a human being trying to get through the day. That should already be enough.